Good morning, everyone. Welcome to committee members. Welcome members of staff. It's 8:30 in the morning on Thursday, February 1st, and this is the meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority Administration and Projects Committee. I call this meeting to order. First, we'll start with a short video.
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Thank you. Taryn, would you be kind enough to conduct a roll call?
Commissioner Unrich?
Here.
Commissioner Fedeli?
Here.
Commissioner Nowak?
Here.
Vice Chair Sauce?
Here.
And we have Chair Hernandez Thorpe absent.
All right, thank you very much. Next item is public comment. This is when we invite members of the public to address the committee on any matters that are not on the agenda. Does anybody in attendance wish to speak? Seeing none, Taryn, do we have anybody coming in remotely or by email?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll close public comment. Next item is the consent calendar. Does any committee member wish to poll an item? Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Motion. We have a motion, Nowak, second, Arnrich, all in favor? Oh, we do. Okay, let's do a roll call. Thank you. I forgot about that.
And I just want to note that we have no virtual public comment. Commissioner Unrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Fedeli?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes.
Vice Chair Sauce?
Yes.
And we'll wait just a second for Chair Hernandez Thorpe. Would you like to vote yes on the consent
Consent
calendar?
calendar, Lamar.
All right, and we have a yes, we have a unanimous approval.
Motion carries unanimously. Welcome, Chair, Mr. Chair. We just did the consent calendars, so we're now on regular agenda items.
Okay, regular agenda. We'll go to item 4A, legislative update. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Johnson.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Watts, who is here to provide a state legislative update.
Thank you, Lindy, and pleased to be before you today. I'm sorry, Chair and board members, that I'm addressing you from home, but I'm operating under COVID sequestration. It's the first I've had, so I'm trying to get used to it. Nevertheless, since the last APC meeting, the state budget came out, and I just want to give you just a quick top line headings of what has occurred in the budget and show where there's some issues that need to be addressed by the transportation community going forward. If you recall, 2 years ago, the governor provided $4 billion for what they call the TIRCP program. 2 was for a competitive program for transit and rail programs. And the other 2 was going to be for flexible purposes. by transit agencies distributed on a formula basis, and we had to fight to retain it this last year in the budget, and lo and behold, in January, they haven't removed it. They've delayed the access through appropriations to some of the money. So the competitive grants will be stretched out to as late as 2027-28. And the formula-based, population-based distribution that I think many transit agencies were looking forward to sees a delay from this year to next year. So those are in play right now, and I've not heard any discussion about addressing those delays given the magnitude of the overall state budget condition. Other small items of interest were the active transportation program receives a proposed cut from the governor of $200 million and delay of $300 million over the next 2 years. In addition, the Highways to Boulevards program saw a delay over 3 years. And finally, the Port and Freight Infrastructure program also saw a delay of $100 million. So that's the activity that we've seen with respect to the governor's proposals. The subcommittees haven't geared up yet, although they're already analyzing these proposals. Two things I want to point out with respect to the budget. It boils down to one. There's an overarching issue, and I think it was discussed when the governor released his budget, that his budget relied on a revenue basis of $38 billion deficit, and the LAO previously had cited a $68 billion deficit. And the folks who are handling the budget are thinking it's going to be closer to the 68 than the 38. So people are starting to batten down the hatches and trying to figure out what they need to do. One bit of analytical information that addresses the discrepancy of $30 billion is the fact that the difference is not apples to apples, it's kind of apples to oranges, because the governor's proposal deals with K-12 funding under Prop 98 in a manner that's different than the LAO. So if there's some reconciliation on how to handle education funding, that would bring the number closer together, and we'll still need to wait until we see more receipts closer to April, see how the budget is actually turning out. So that's my overview on the state budget. I have really good news in many respects. The State Transportation Commission has received a new appointee appointed by the Speaker. The Speaker is appointing a gentleman by the name of Robert Tiffany, who's up until December a San Benito County supervisor and local businessman in the San Benito County area. It's the home area for the Speaker, so he knows him very well. He will be replacing Commissioner Joe Liu, who had been appointed by Speaker Rendon, and his term terminated, well, actually today. So that appointment is timely, and it shows the interest of the Speaker of having somebody close on that commission of 9 to 11 members that he can have immediate access to. The other thing I want to bring to your attention are bills. I want to refresh your memory that there are two holdover bills that are in the Senate, the second house. This is AB 6 by Friedman and AB 7 by Friedman. Both made it through, and the first bill, AB 6, requires the Air Board to develop new targets for emissions, GHG emissions, for preparing sustainable community strategies. AB 7 is on Senate inactive file, and it requires the Secretary's Office, Caltrans, and the CTC to incorporate the climate goals developed by the administration into guidelines for competitive grant programs. So there's a long way to go for negotiations on these. The committee staff in the Senate assure me that these bills would be, because of they're in the second house already, probably not heard until May or June of this coming year. So we'll try to negotiate and discuss with the author where she wants to end up on her bills. Other themes of bills, there's a theme of autonomous vehicles again. There's Mr. Ting in the Assembly has introduced a spot bill. He is interested in dealing with some of the issues that emerged in San Francisco with the incidents where first responders vehicles were hit by some of the vehicles that were under a fully autonomous control. So we're not sure how that's going to turn out. SB 915 by Mr. Cortese, Senator Cortese from San Jose area, would authorize local entities to have control over what autonomous vehicles can be operated and when and under what conditions within their locality. And in addition, we've heard stated by Assemblywoman Aguirre Curry that she's going to press ahead with another attempt at mandating drivers in truck autonomous vehicles. Two other bills I want to bring your attention to. Well, actually, there's a couple. First, AB 960 affects mostly Caltrans issues, but some of these projects in the SHOP program would be co-funded by local entities like self-help counties. This bill would require all Caltrans projects, every single project that they undertake, to provide comfortable, convenient, and connected complete streets components. So to do that, there's no fund that's set aside to actually achieve that goal. So it would have to come at the expense of the major SHOP program, which is the major rehabilitation and reconstruction program that Caltrans operates, whether it's on the freeways or in Main Street roadways. The other bills I want to draw to your attention to, and we're going to have to take a close look at these. These are the bills that deal with Bay Area funding or consolidation. AB 1837 by Ms. Pappen. It's a spot bill right now to encourage collaboration among transit agencies in the Bay Area. We'll have to wait and see how that language turns out. In addition, SB 926 is a rerun of a bill by the author, Senator Wahab, that would require Caltrans to prepare a plan for Bay Area transit consolidation. And lastly, I'll point out that SB 925 by Senator Wiener is a spot bill for a revenue package for the Bay Area. So we're waiting to see how that emerges. So those would be the highlights of things I'd like to present to you today. And thank you for your patience and attention.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So your memo to us says that SB 397 has been put over and killed for the rest of the year, but the effort at Caltrans with Wahab is proceeding, dealing with consolidation?
Yeah, so that's correct. So she's basically reintroduced I call it, it's not quite a spot bill, but it is, because it's not fleshed out yet. So
Okay.
correct.
She got a lot of press locally in the Bay Area for that on the radio and KQED, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a smart way to introduce an
It's a
issue.
bill, right.
It-
Will we be talking about the state and federal plans for the CCT? Will you be dealing?
That's the next agenda item.
Okay, great. Because I was just wondering whether or not you're following or caring about ACA 1 as far as the state. If that, I didn't see that on the state plan, but as far as following it this year, well, you'll be.
Is that directed to me? Because I can
Yes,
answer that.
yes, thank you.
We're watching, so that bill that measure is on the ballot in November.
Right.
And it offers, as you know, a change in the vote threshold for either infrastructure-related bonds or for sales tax, and one or two other small taxes that are on the books. going from 2/3 to 55%. Now, there's been a lot of rumors about folks who want amendments, and we're tracking this very carefully. I have several, in addition to CCTA, I have Placer who's going to the ballot. Well, let me say it this way. I have two clients that are going to the ballot in November, Placer County and Riverside County, and they are very deeply concerned about what's going to happen in November. And then to add to that
Which way?
concern, fact that
Which way are they concerned?
they want to make sure what is going to be the final issue so they can plan their expenditure. Here's the issue. The rumors abounded back in December and early January, but they've fallen off, that the affordable housing industry, I'll call it that was behind ACA 1 to begin with, and a lot of the elements of ACA 1 deal with affordable housing, wanted to cut out of the definition of eligible infrastructure the piece that talks about transit and basically highways and roads. They wanted to cut out the highways and roads and take that opportunity away. That may still be lurking out there, but so far it's not seen light of day. Other amendments have been floated that would provide some more flexibility for transit to be, for the transit infrastructure definition to allow funds pursuant, to allow the revenues that are generated from an ACA 1 qualified measure to also be expendable upon transit operations, not just the infrastructure. That has not got any legs yet, but I've been in touch with Mr. Wiener's office off and on over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there's no movement on that front. So if you're ready to go in November and you hear these rumors and you need to button down your expenditure plans, you need to be doing that probably in the next 2 months. And, if we see a change in the law with a urgency bill or some other measure that changes what's actually on the ballot, then that could result in a difficult campaign or almost impossible campaign. And some measures could be disqualified because they no longer meet whatever that new test is going to be. So it's a very, very fluid situation, but I'm on top of it every step of the way.
Yeah,
right
it
now.
does sound like you're on top of it. Let us know if we can help. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you.
Commissioner Sauce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, thank you. As always, a clear and pithy presentation. Really appreciate it. I want to go back to, I think you said there's a bill floating around that would give local jurisdictions the authority to regulate which autonomous vehicles are permitted within their borders. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, I may have not said it precisely, but it is local control over their jurisdiction.
And
Correct.
who are the proponents of this, and has there been any preliminary analysis on what the impact of that would be?
Not yet. Mr. Cortese developed it on his own, I'm told by his chief of staff, out of alarm of what was going on in San Francisco with, state authorized through the PUC and DMV regulations, state authorized autonomous vehicles running around in geocached zones in San Francisco, but yet still colliding with third parties. So he was alarmed at that and thought that the local governments need to have some authority in that space and not just rely on the state. So that's where it came from.
So it was reflexive.
Correct.
Okay.
And maybe just, Cal City's also co-sponsoring the bill.
Really?
Yeah, I was just going to add to it on Monday. A couple of us, I think Chris Kelly's on the committee, the subcommittee for policy on transportation. This item's coming to us. Tim, I, and Lindy were in Cortese's office on Monday. I sort of joked, I said, look, I'll trade you housing planning control and we'll forget this other one, because the idea that you'd have 484, 483 now, individual roadmaps. It'd be like having a new driver's license in each city that you go to. And so the subcommittee, even though the board says they want to, they need the subcommittee to confirm that. And it's really unfortunate. It's just a fear reaction. And it's really politically, in my personal opinion, it is just a bone being thrown back to cities. See, here's local control. You go deal with us. And that really is a statewide. It's when it rises up to the level that it affects all of us. That's why the state is supposed to step in with a policy,
Right.
as opposed to these individual things. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's an invitation to a regulatory tossed salad. And what's the bill number on this?
915.
Yes,
SB
Yes.
915?
correct.
Okay, please keep us posted.
Will
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. May I make one small addition? I did also just want to mention you, Vice Chair Sauce, had brought up AB 817, which is a bill that has to do with teleconferencing for subcommittees. We're also monitoring that bill, and just want you to know.
I heard it was dead in the water.
My understanding is that it moved from the Assembly to the Senate.
Really? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Please keep
Continue to look
us
at that.
posted, because this is the one that would allow citizen advisory committees to come in by Zoom, which I think would help citizen participation and transparency immensely.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what we were told at another meeting, so.
I'll look into it now.
Okay, thank you, Lindy.
All right, any other comments, questions? Are there any public comments related to this matter?
No public comment.
Okay, no public comment, so thank you for your report, Mr. Watts. And we will now move to item 4B.
No, actually, sorry to jump in.
I'm sorry, yes, you're right, federal.
No
How
problem.
could we forget about the federal government? Lord knows I don't sleep thinking about that.
Well, in that case, it's my pleasure to introduce Gus Maples to provide us with our federal update.
I wish I could say there was nothing going on and we could just walk right over this one, but I believe the opposite's the case. Good to see everybody this morning, and good recently seeing some of the CCTA team, Commissioner Arnridge out here in Washington, updating our friends on the Hill and at the federal agencies on the latest going on in the county. I just had a meeting actually yesterday with the Senate Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee ranking member, Hyde Smith from Mississippi. She got her transportation appropriations, the allocation, to move forward on closing out that bill for federal fiscal year 24 this weekend. This is working within the confines of the top line spending agreement that new Speaker Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Schumer had negotiated just a couple of weeks ago. This is all positive development because the transportation funding for US DOT will run out March 1st. A few other federal agencies are also on that timeline, and then the rest of the federal government appropriations will expire March 8th. So they have their marching orders, they have their numbers, and we'll begin working out the differences between the House and Senate. As a bit of a recap here now, you'll probably recall that the House of Representatives under this Congress Republican control really pushed for lower levels of funding across the board. Even defense was a point of contention, which is a historically Republican base of support. So the House had actually cut from their top line about 25% between transportation and housing programs. The Senate more or less maintained fiscal year 23 levels. For instance, they continue the RAISE grant program at $800 million in addition to what's provided by the infrastructure law. I know that's very popular with local governments as being an access point for federal funds. The House also really significantly cut a lot of rail programs and safety programs related to that. That's actually why they were unable to pass this bill in the House out of the full House from too much opposition to the level of funding cuts they had. These allocation numbers, as they now negotiate amongst each other, are all secret. Based on conversations I've had yesterday and with some of the committee leadership, I believe the number is going to be higher than the House level, which is good. I think the House was simply unworkable, but probably closer to the middle than that full Senate funding level. So we could see some cuts as they make priorities among the different program levels. We always advocate for robust funding for discretionary grants. Our county delegation is well aware of our priorities. In conversation yesterday as well, the senator did acknowledge she's very familiar and has a background in state government, familiar with the impact that a lot of those grants that will be up for negotiation and debate, the impact they have on local level programs and operations. So that was very heartening to hear that she'll be fighting for that. As I said, we're working towards a March 1st deadline to finish out these bills. It'll take probably 2.5 weeks just to negotiate everything. And this also encompasses the broader government, health and human services, labor programs, things of that nature. And then hoping for a early March enactment before the April sequestration would otherwise kick in. That would be a 1% just across the board haircut across all programs. In other transportation news, Senate Commerce Committee Chairman Cantwell just announced that she's going to schedule a hearing next week to reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration. That would be a 5-year bill. The House, overwhelmingly in bipartisan support, has already passed its version for this. The Senate has been tied up on pilot training issues as well as pilot retirement age issues as two major points of contention. So this is actually the second attempt they'll have to pass this bill out of committee and move forward. March 8th is also the deadline that the FAA current extension will expire for those programs. That includes things like the airport improvement grants, which is a huge resource for the aviation industry and local municipal nexus there. Those are the top things on the agenda this week. Of course, also last night, just for awareness, the House of Representatives passed a pretty significant tax measure. Everyone, or a lot of the business community, is very supportive of it. It includes an R&D change that had expired, I believe, starting 2 years ago now, as well as child tax credit enhancements, continuing those. The measure will now move to the Senate. I think there's a lot of interest in this bill and interest in seeing it through. Of course, the Senate will have to consider amendments to this, possibly not move it as quickly as the House did, as this more started with the House Committee of Jurisdiction. The Ways and Means Committee really led the charge on crafting this, but passed it in a very bipartisan manner. And for that to come out of the House of Representatives, that's heartening for its prospects. It's typically a very partisan process. So that's still working through the system as well, but that's another major piece of legislation that's under consideration currently. I think that sums up my presentation, unless there are any questions about this.
Any questions? Okay, no one has questions on austerity measures. Fantastic. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. What is it, 25% out of housing? Because we don't need it.
No. I don't expect that to be what's done at the end of the day, but that's what they're working up from. So.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your report. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments.
No public comments. Okay, we'll move on to item 4B, approval of a proposal for 2024 state and federal legislative advocacy programs.
Thank you, Chair. Chair and Commissioners, I am presenting today our 2024 state legislative and federal legislative advocacy platforms. For the public and for all of you, it begins on page 209 of your packet, and they are one-pagers front and back for each. Today's staff is asking for approval of both platforms. I did want to go over a little bit about some of what was added this year. A lot of this kind of carries over and continues to be part of our legislative platform year over year, but there have been some additions or I wanted to point out some places in which there is clear connection to things happening this year. For example, in your 2024 state legislative advocacy platform, there is support for any constitutional amendment that would lower the voting threshold requirement. This clearly relates to ACA 1 and will likely be a part of that conversation this year. There's also a monitor state and regional efforts to establish a new transportation revenue measure and advocate for equitable share for Contra Costa County. That will relate this year to the regional transportation measure that's being discussed via SB 925, which I feel like is a very fitting number for that bill, particularly when we're talking about advocating for Contra Costa. I also wanted to point out that we added support for workforce development programs to incentivize career pathways and mitigate the employment impact of autonomous technology. That's under the Connected and Autonomous Vehicle Policy and Funding area. That's an addition this year and relates a lot to the work we're doing with Momentum 2.0 and really thinking about workforce development here in this space. Lastly, I wanted to add on the state platform, we added some streamlining language. We'd always had a streamlining section, but we really bulked that up this year, kind of looking into MTC and some of the ways in which they engaged in this conversation through their legislative platform this year. The last point under that is engage in regulatory and legislative efforts to facilitate the deployment of new mobility technologies, which of course will relate to some of the work we'll be doing with CCTA 4.0 and really thinking about technology and transportation in the coming year and years to come. Those are the highlights for the state legislative platform. I'd like to move over to the federal one, but I'll pause first and see if there's any questions on the state.
Commissioner Sauce.
Thank you, Lindy. One of the pieces of the platform is, quote, monitor policies to create a more user-friendly, connected Contra Costa Transit network that better serves existing transit riders and attracts new riders to transit. Linda, I was hoping you could drill down on that a little bit. I mean, what do we mean? Why do we use monitor instead of something more active and proactive? And what does that mean with respect to the noise around consolidation of transit agencies?
It's a great question. I'm seeing Tim kind of lean in, so it sounds like he might have some thoughts as well. But I think I would say that I think we're using monitor there primarily in acknowledgement that we don't know exactly what the state suggestion might be in regards to how to achieve that, right? And it could potentially be contradictory to some of our other policy priorities here, particularly as it relates to the use of funding. At the same time, through the integrated transit plan, this is clearly a priority, thinking about how to create a transit system that works better and is really user first and rider first. And so therefore it felt important to emphasize our interest in that as an issue, but I think we used monitor versus perhaps support, just recognizing that there could at times be contradiction. Hopefully that's helpful. And it looks like Tim might want to chime in as well.
Yeah, if I could. One of the issues that comes up when you talk about being more proactive on that piece is that it doesn't necessarily fall just within county lines. That's been a discussion point on a lot of this coordination and consolidation that the transit agencies, as you know, already have, like County Connection with LAFTA, right? That crosses county lines. So where those improvements can really be made, it's hard for, I think the county can support and monitor and chime in and stuff, but being more proactive as far as actually taking action, I think gets a little stickier. I mean, as you can, I'll go into that later, the discussions at MTC, but there's a lot of coordination already going on, and so the consolidation piece gets much stickier and hard to do that just within county lines.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. And the monitoring is a perfect word then under these circumstances. But my question is, has this authority taken a position or weighed in on the discussions around consolidation?
No, we have not officially.
Okay, thank you.
But we should. Yeah.
I think when we can better understand where a lot of these bills are going, as they evolve through the legislature, then I think because typically what we'll do is our process is that we set the state and federal policies, this time, and then probably like right around April, May, as the bills become more certain, then, we'll bring them back to the authority board to take a support or oppose or neutral position, depending on what the bills are. So I think a lot of this, given, there's a lot of stakeholders involved in this, I think the other important thing, to say monitor is I think it's also really important to make sure that we're collaborating with our transit operator partners and just make sure that we're, kind of lockstep with them, in terms of the direction that they want to take. And so that way, as we're taking either support or opposed positions, we're doing it collectively together, and not necessarily just CCTA, and doing it more collaboratively in more of a coalition fashion.
Commissioner Fedeli.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a general statement about both the state and the federal, before we get to the federal, is to applaud the priority given to safety, the word safety, prioritized above everything else. It's something I think this commission needs to remember and continue to focus on. So thank you for that.
All right, anybody else? Any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you for your update.
Really quickly, I actually just wanted to bring attention to two things on the federal policy platform before we move forward, which is just that I do think that a lot of the federal policy platform really dives into some of the things that we hope to deepen or socialize the knowledge of the work that CCTA is doing, including this seek broader awareness of transit reforms, which I think relates to the integrated transit plan and some of the work that we're doing here that's somewhat unique, as well as the seek and support federal solutions to resolve issues related to domestic manufacturing of autonomous vehicles. I think that relates a lot to the ACES coalition work regarding kind of connected and autonomous vehicles, and I think that's something that we'll continue to do throughout this year. So I just wanted to bring attention to how this platform kind of emphasizes deepening the knowledge of the work that CCTA is doing on the federal level.
I would move this item.
All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Fedeli, seconded by Commissioner Nowak. Any public comment?
No public comment.
No public comment, and so we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Arnridge?
Aye.
Commissioner Fedeli?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes?
Vice Chair Sauce?
Yes.
Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sauce, did you have a question?
No.
Oh,
Sid.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, but good job, Lindy. Thank you.
Okay, item 4C, authorization to execute funding agreement number 08C.08 with Central Contra Costa Transportation Authority for innovative deployments to enhance Arterials Grants Central Transit Signal Priority System. Mr. Kisham. It says Lindy.
Oh, really?
I'm never going to read the script again. I'm just going to stick to
I'm
what
happy to
I
take over,
know.
Sham, if that.
Is it John on the other side? Oh, okay. All right. Sounds good. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the committee members. Now to the fun part of the meeting. It has been, my name is Hisham Naimi. I'm the Director of Programming at CCTA, and I'm pleased to present this item. It has been several months, actually 7 months, since we last provided you an update on this item. I think it was May 2022 when you approved the contract with GTT, which is now acquired by MyoVision to do this project. I just wanted to take a few minutes to give you an update on where we are and how the Swiftly subscription, which is the item in front of you, fits into the overall picture. Let me see if I can move my slides. Okay. I'm assuming you can see my PowerPoint on
Yes.
this? Okay, great. There are many partners on this project, and this is an area where CCTA really needed to step in to make the project happen. We have two cities, the city of Walnut Creek and the city of Concord, who own the traffic signals. They own them and maintain them. County Connection, which runs service in both cities, along with other cities in central Contra Costa County. MTC, who is the funding agency for this project, and CCTA was asked to basically take the lead in deploying the project and be responsible for the operation and maintenance of the system once it's deployed. The project goals, the immediate goal is to improve the travel time reliability for the buses and help with their adherence to schedule. The ultimate goal is, along with this improvement and other things we do, to help entice more people to use transit in the county. And that will, in turn, help improve air quality and all the other good stuff. This is just a pilot project. The ultimate goal is to roll this out throughout the county when needed, when we're ready. This is just a picture of the study area. There are 66 intersections being that are part of this project, 35 in the city of Concord and 31 in Walnut Creek. They cover 4 bus routes, Route 4, 5, which are in Walnut Creek, and they connect the downtown area to the BART station, as well as Route 15 and 20 in the city of Concord, which also connect to the BART station. The red dots you see here are the intersections that we're still having some issues with, and I'll explain later. So there are 5 outstanding intersections at this point that we're still working on. TSP, or Transit Signal Priority, is not a new thing. It has been implemented by many agencies for many years. What they have implemented is what we call a legacy system, where it's a distributed system. You put equipment on the bus and equipment on the signal, and use infrared or some other means to basically communicate the bus, to have communication between the bus and the traffic signal. The problem with this system, it's a legacy system. A lot of the vendors no longer support it. It's also, it's either on or off. You cannot have conditional priority. And because of, and because of all the equipment you have, there is a large maintenance cost to keep this equipment working. Why we chose a cloud-based system? A cloud-based system does not require equipment. It basically sits on the cloud, and basically the priority request is generated on the cloud based on information on where the bus is at, the location of the bus, whether it's behind schedule, whether there are passengers on the bus or not. So it can generate that request and then send it through the internet, basically using what we call the NTICIP protocols to the controller. And then the controller basically decides whether to grant the request or not. With the cloud-based systems, it's obviously a newer technology. But with that technology, you can decide in the future to expand the system to, for example, use it for emergency preemption rather than what's mostly being used now, the optical system. Or you could decide in the future to expand it to give priority to shared autonomous vehicles. Doesn't have to be buses, as long as you know where the location of the fleet is, of each bus or autonomous vehicles or emergency vehicle. You can change the system to provide priority to those different classes of vehicles. Of course, the pros of a central TSP system is you have fewer equipment to maintain. You can use them, as I mentioned, you can scale it, you can add intersections to the system a lot easier than you do with the legacy systems. And the system you're deploying can be used for other things as well. As I mentioned, you can decide in the future to deploy it to help shared autonomous vehicles or replace your emergency preemption system. Of course, for the system to work, you really need to have good communication. You have to have communication with the bus, and you have to have communication with the controllers. So if your system is offline, if your TMCs are not able to communicate with the controller, the system will just not work because you have no way to communicate with that controller. Of course, this is all cloud-based, so cybersecurity is always an issue, and you need to take that into consideration. And your controllers, I mean, the message sent by the system needs to be consistent, needs to work with all types of controllers. So the controllers you're deploying in the field basically need to be NTCIP 1202 or 1211 compliant. If they're not, then the controller wouldn't understand what to do with the message they're getting.
Before you leave that, just really important. The way you said it, it sounded like if the communication link goes down, it doesn't work. Well, the traffic signal still works. It functions exactly the way it's supposed to. It does not interfere with it.
Right.
All that doesn't work is the prioritization as that vehicle comes up. It says, it doesn't see you anymore. So the system still works. That's the fail-safe, fail-secure system.
Absolutely,
I just want to
yes.
make sure. Okay.
Yes, no, thanks for the clarification. What I meant to say is the TSP system will not work.
It drop off.
Yeah. This is just a depiction of the system architecture. You have the Opticom GTT system basically sitting in the cloud. It basically communicates, gets the location data of the bus from equipment that's already on the bus, the modems. Every bus has a modem because it's connected to the CAD AVL system, the transit dispatch system. So basically with minor tweaking, that information goes directly to the Opticom system. It does require an annual subscription for each bus to get that information from the maker of the modem, which in this case, it's called Cradlepoint. In terms of the schedule and the occupancy, whether the bus is in service or not, we get that from what they call the GTFS real-time data. This is something that every transit agency is now required to publish, showing the status of each bus, whether it's behind schedule, number of people on the bus, and so on. So we get that from the GTFS data, which also, that's what feeds the 511.org and other systems. By doing it this way, we basically avoided working directly with the CAD AVL system. It turned out that to be, if we were to get that information directly from the CAD AVL, that would have been an extra $500,000 to do additional programming, and it may not have, and it would have increased the timeline of the project. So that's really the genius of the proposal from GTT, is they found a way around dealing with the CAD AVL while still being able to get the same data. Now, once you get the data, you have basically a software that can decide based on certain condition whether to request a priority request from a specific controller based on the bus location, as I mentioned, schedule and occupancy. If it decides to request it, then that request goes through the city's traffic management center through a VPN connection, basically, and then to the controller to make that request. And then the controller will make the decision whether to grant the request or not based on the condition at the intersections. So that's basically in a nutshell how the system will work. So where we are now is we actually completed the communication and functionality testing at 30 intersections in Walnut Creek and 31 in Concord. The ones that were shown in red dot are the ones that are still outstanding. What that means is we were able to verify that a request was being sent by the Opticom system, the cloud-based system, to the controller, and the controller acknowledged receiving it and acted upon that request. And we were also able to do it, to test it using the conditional priority, when certain conditions are met. When the schedule, when we wanted basically to only send requests when the bus is behind schedule, or if it has more than 10% full of passengers. So we were able to test for those conditions, and the testing was successful. What we're doing now is just developing a verification and acceptance plan of the project, which we're finalizing, and working on the remaining intersections that are still outstanding. So in terms of the next steps, we are expecting to turn on the system in mid-February. It will be running for a month. There is a requirement that it'll be 99% reliable. The system has to be up 99% of the time. Once that's proved, then we can accept the system. Assuming everything goes as planned, we're expecting to accept the system in mid-March. In the meantime, we're doing some training and documentation of the system. And as part of the project, we will be doing an evaluation study to see the impacts of the project, the benefits. So the data collection for the before study has been done, and we will do the after study after the system has been turned on. As part of the contract, we have a 3-year operation and maintenance warranty with GTT. It's approximately $100,000 to operate and maintain for the total of the 3 years. And we will be doing a public awareness campaign once the system is up and running. Where Swiftly subscription fits into this, because we're doing a before and after study, we wanted to validate the data that we're collecting. Swiftly is one way to do that. County Connection basically had a subscription to Swiftly. It's pretty expensive, $85,000 a year. But what it does, it tells you where the bus is, how much it spent at each spot, what the speed was between different locations, and so on. And we think that information is going to be valuable for the after study to validate our information. Because we need that information, the request to the board is to basically contribute $20,000 from the project funds, from the grant we got, to help County Connection pay for that subscription cost. So we're offsetting a small portion of that cost. In terms of the public awareness campaign, Lindy and I are talking to the stakeholders and the vendor, and we anticipate to do everything you see on the screen, including YouTube videos and as well as some interviews with some of our commissioners and maybe the executive director as well about the project. This project didn't go without challenges. There were many challenges we encountered in this project, and this lists some of them. For example, with COVID, there was a problem securing the traffic controllers from the vendors. That took a long time. Once you get the traffic controller, basically there is like a 21-day to test each controller, and the capacity to test more than 2 or 3 was difficult to find. So that basically drove the schedule. This was really the critical path item. Our controllers needed to be NTCIP compliant. Many vendors claim they are compliant, but unless somebody verifies that, you really cannot take them for their word. Our controllers in the cities were NTCIP 1202 compliant, but not 1211 compliant. So we had to work with the vendor, and they are working on a software basically upgrade to make them compliant. That's critical because the messages you're getting from the software need to be consistent with across different vendors. We had construction tours during the project, so the bus routes actually had to be changed by County Connection. And just in the middle of the project, the Broadway Plaza in downtown Walnut Creek was closed to traffic. So right now, buses don't go through it. So we added basically more intersections to the project to accommodate the new route. And that added 4 more intersections to the project. Network reliability is a big issue. If the traffic management center cannot communicate to all the controllers, then you really cannot send a request to the controller. So that's why we needed to wait for the City of Concord, for example, to finish their fiber optic project, connecting all their traffic signals. And as I mentioned earlier, the Cradle Point modem subscription is essential for this project. That's how we know where the bus is located every second. And finally, we're finding an issue where some of the buses County Connection have, especially the electric ones, are just not reliable. They keep breaking. So they get substituted by other buses that are not part of the project. They're not TSB enabled. Well, if you don't ensure that only TSB-enabled buses are running on your routes, then you don't really get the benefits of the project. So that's an issue we're trying to address by equipping more buses so they have the ability to substitute projects when needed. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for Hisham? Commissioner Noack?
So I'm going to try to go to plain English on some of this. When you're saying a request is made and then decisions made, that's all being made by computers. That's not really with people interfering, saying, okay, yeah, they got enough people on the bus, let them go through. This is sort of programmatically set up to say, okay, we're receiving a signal from a bus, it's got 30 people on it, it's crowded, we're gonna let them go through, right?
We're going to send the request, and then the controller, based on the traffic conditions and set timing plans, will decide whether to grant it or not. And the way to grant it is they either extend the green time where the bus is heading, or they shorten the red time if the bus is stopped at the red light, so they can get moving quicker.
Okay, and then, yeah, so that's, when we say controller, it's really
the signal
a computer
controller, yes.
Controlling. So just for a lot of people, when I'm thinking controller, I'm thinking a person's sitting there making a decision. So, and then the second piece on the public awareness, I'm assuming our public awareness is to tell people that this traffic signal prioritization is going in, so you should ride buses because they're going to have priority, right? I'm assuming that's what we're going to try to communicate to people, not the rest of the stuff.
Yes.
Nobody else is going to understand the rest of it.
We're going to slow down the other traffic by prioritizing that.
Yeah,
On the positive.
Yeah, I was just making sure what our public information was that we were putting out there. So, okay, thank you.
So there were nanosecond decisions, though, with this, with what Sue's talking about. Nanoseconds, these are not humans.
Commissioner Sauce?
Thank you. Hisham, thanks for that presentation. How did we collect the before data? Because I assume Swiftly was not up and running, right? And how is that done? And not in gruesome detail, but just generally speaking.
Yeah, we actually had people sit on the bus, videotape, and record basically information for multiple bus routes.
Okay, thank you.
And then the information will be validated. That's how we're going to know whether Swiftly information is accurate enough for us to do the after study, rather than sending people on those same bus routes.
So I think you've answered my next question, which is for the after picture. The Swiftly will be the source of that data. We will not, assuming we've validated it, we won't need to use other sources of information.
Yeah, we will spot check it. We might be using other sources as well. I mean, we're looking at all types of data and as well as other vendors. There is a company called IDO World, who claim to provide the same type of information. So we're testing their information as well.
Okay.
But they're much cheaper supposedly than Swiftly.
And the number of parties and entities collaborating on this is fantastic, and this is really a great example of coordination. But who ultimately is responsible for the proper operation of the Swiftly system?
We are CCTA. CCTA entered into a cooperative agreement with the stakeholders about a year ago. Basically outlines every agency's responsibilities. Yeah, we are responsible, but they're also responsible of telling us of changing, like if they change the bus route or if they change the schedule. So every party has a responsibility, but ultimately we are responsible for the operation and maintenance of the project.
And to Paul's earlier point about public safety, is that part of the data that's going to be collected as incidents and that sort of thing?
That's a part of the parameters we're collecting data on in the before and after study. Is the project improving safety or causing accidents or? So we will be collecting that information.
And if it's the former, where it's improving safety, I assume that will be part of the public outreach campaign. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fedeli, then.
Yes, thank you. Following up on Commissioner Sauce's point a little bit, I was just curious, since we're saying in the staff report we're completing the deployment of the project in both cities, how exactly I'm curious, CCTA get involved? Were we approached, or we approached the cities and the bus system? Because that will give us some indication on future projects if we're moving toward CCTA 4.0. How did we get involved?
Well, it basically, I think 3 years ago, we were working with County Connection. County Connection does not have TSP so far. So this was their first project to do this. So they came to us and they asked us whether we can help, and we contacted the City of Concord, and we basically submitted an application to MTC on behalf of County Connection and the City of Concord. Well, we got the grant, and at the same time, Walnut Creek had submitted a similar application to do the same thing in the City of Walnut Creek. So after both of our agencies got the grants, we sat together, we said, well, we cannot have two different TSP systems in the same, for County Connection, because it's in the same service area. So let's combine efforts and do a single project. And that's when CCTA was asked to take the lead. We were asked to take the lead by County Connection because they have to deal with multiple cities to implement.
So we were approached,
Yeah.
and we assisted in getting the grants for the project.
Yes.
It's great.
Maybe I can just add to that, because I think I remember having very distinct conversations with Hisham as the project was evolving. So we were asked to take the lead on the grant application. And I think at that time, I don't think really anyone understood who was going to be operating and maintaining the system. Okay, so typically when you do a systems types of project like this, you do what's called a concept of operations. And so through the concept of operation process, that's where you flesh out some of these details. You do a lot of stakeholder engagement, outreach, work with the cities, work with the trans operators, and you're deciding and figuring out what are those policies, who's going to do, what are going to be the roles and responsibilities of the project, who's going to do what, right? And so I think what happened is we were going through, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hisham, but as we were going through that CONOP process, County Connection didn't want to necessarily, they're like, we don't have the expertise to operate and maintain something like this, and then the cities were, this doesn't make sense because this crosses multiple city boundaries. And then even MTC's like, well, we shouldn't O&M this because we're a regional agency. And so it kind of got narrowed to the point where it's like, see, it makes sense for an agency like CCTA to step into this role, right? So we flushed it out, through the concept operations. We didn't assume walking into the grant that we were going to take on this role. And so I think it's important to recognize that, that this is a really, really good example of that kind of digital road manager, the stuff that we've been kind of talking about with the board and the board workshop and CCTA 4.0. I appreciate you bringing that up, Commissioner Fideli. There's a really good example of CCTA 4.0 of us, stepping into that O&M role, into that digital role, and helping to kind of take a better active role in terms of managing the system, right? And so that's kind of how we arrived in terms of what our role, and we're going through very similar processes, like on Innovate 680, we're going through roles and responsibilities, what should CCTA's role be? And so a lot of the conversations that we're having on these projects has led us to building in the CCTA 4.0 vision and really looking at, what is CCTA's role going to be in the future.
Excellent. Commissioner Arnich?
Yeah, I would just add to Paul's comments that historically, this is really what CCTA has been doing really for the past 20 years, that we assist cities. And as you know, we're all different sizes. Some are sort of small. We might have one person in transportation. Some don't have any. It's a part-time planner. That we've been able to leverage our assets, our skill sets to help cities take on bigger projects, no different than San Ramon, no different than the Transit Center planning process out in West County. And I think this is something that just keeps evolving. And again, each city has different needs. So this one really, really makes a lot of sense. But Hisham, what are in a high level view, what are of the 5 intersections? What's the challenges there and what's holding up?
Well, it's 2 of them. We need to wait for the fiber optic project to be done, to have communication with. I think the issue with the remaining 3 has been resolved. It was about configuration and setting within the controller itself.
Oh, good. Okay. So totally within hand. So that's great. I'd be glad to move this item when we get to that.
Second.
All right, are there any public comments?
No public comment.
Okay, I believe there is a motion by Commissioner Arnich, seconded by Commissioner Nowak. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Arnrich?
Aye.
Commissioner Fideli?
Aye.
Commissioner Nowak?
Yes?
Vice Chair Sauce?
Yes.
Chair Hernandez-Thorpe?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, item 5, correspondence and communications. We have none. Item 6, commissioner and staff comments. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Arnich and then Commissioner Nowak.
I would just mention I had the pleasure to tag along with our executive director, Tim Hales, and Lindy to Sacramento to listen in and sort of find out what Cortese and some of these other people, why are they coming up with the transportation? And what I took away from it was the message I think Tim and Lindy were presenting is that CTA is an expert in a lot of these areas, and we can be the resource to their staff because they're going to people who are not as well informed about transportation issues, and particularly autonomous vehicles. They're talking to people that really have no experience in it per se, other than the public perception of it. And so if anything that I think would have accomplished out of those meetings would be that connection for the future.
So I just want to give a quick rundown on MTC and this regional transportation measure, massive discussion that will be, I think, my life for the next 2 years. But, it was approved for the enabling legislation to be moved forward. I think the 2 biggest issues at MTC are, one, this consolidation versus coordination, which we talked a lot about, and we sort of landed on coordination. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, which I'm not sure Senator Wahab is necessarily aware of when she just says, consolidate all 27 agencies. There's a lot. It's been studied 3 different times. All 3 times, it hasn't been a very favorable result. Part of it is labor issues. There are other issues involved. And so it's going to be an interesting process. Part of the enabling legislation is to give MTC a little bit more authority to not encourage, but maybe a little stronger than encourage efficiencies and effectiveness in the transportation area, really focusing on trying to improve the situation for the riders. So that's going to be an interesting process, because that's about as far as we got on that whole discussion on coordination consolidation, so it's going to be a big piece. The second piece, and this is where I think it's going to get tricky for Contra Costa County, getting our fair share of any regional transportation measure, is the big discussion on where the money is going to go to. Clearly, I think the idea is transit being the priority, and some of this is meant to resolve the fiscal cliff, which is a fairly big number. I mean, if you look at it, it's like $700 million. And so depending on the size of your measure, when they talk about $1 billion measure, that's not going to get you a whole lot more. And there's obviously people encouraging for more of a $2 billion a year measure versus $1 billion. But there was a big discussion at the last MTC meeting on whether to restrict the measure from having any highway expansion at all, period. And so there was a lot of discussion on that, especially for those counties that are in more rural suburban areas that have highways that don't have parallel transit systems, or transit systems that are developed enough that we may need some expansion highways. Take Highway 37, for example. And so I think we had 60 public comments last week on this item. And so it's going to be one of those really ongoing, fairly ugly discussion points. And I don't think there's enough data there to really make this decision. But I think what was missing is part of that discussion is how do you get a measure passed? And it doesn't matter how you're going to use the money if you can't get it passed. And so that's going to be a discussion point, whether so many voters that use the highway, if they don't see any improvement in their highways, are they going to vote for a measure that's just maybe focusing on transit that they don't use? And so that's going to be a big discussion point. So it's going to be really interesting. It was interesting to see the parties, what they supported and what they didn't in that 60 public comment period. But this is going to be a lengthy discussion over the next 2 years. But I think the interesting piece in the short term will be what the legislation ends up looking like as far as giving MTC any additional authority to encourage or move consolidation or coordination forward. So that will probably be in the next several months, and I think that will be the short-term interesting thing to look at. Thanks.
Can I just maybe add on that really quick, especially on the highway capacity piece? On terms of the near term, I think what's going to be really important is that how much of this is going to be determined by the legislature, and how much of it's going to be punted down to be put into an expenditure plan. And given this highway capacity issue, and given where a lot of state policy, California Transportation Commission, and even the legislature itself is taking some strong positions right now on highway capacity. So it's going to be really interesting to kind of see how the legislature, to your point, what the legislation is going to look like coming out of this. I mean, there's already discussions of, should this be like Regional Measure 3? Should there be projects in the legislation? Should there not be projects in the legislation? And given the fact that this transit is such a big issue in the legislature right now, with you've got the Transit Transformative Task Force that was just created, and luckily we have Rashidi Barnes on that representing Contra Costa County. But we also have the Senate Transportation or Transit Committee as well, that's led by Senator Wiener, and he's authoring the legislation. And so I think that committee is going to have a big shape in how this legislation is going to come out as well. So that in the near term, it's going to be really important that we spend a lot of time in Sacramento. I know we just went to Sacramento on Monday, but I think it's going to be important that we spend a lot of time in Sacramento really advocating in terms of really making the legislation focused on just enabling the authority to go out and making sure a lot of these policies are then hopefully determined at the local regional level through the expenditure plan rather than the legislature. and so that's going to be the big challenge over the next 3 to 4 months is that balance between the legislation and what's going to happen in the expenditure plan.
Yeah, and I think, part of it, interesting, when Wahab, pulled her bill, then put it back on, I was surprised it came back on that quickly because, as we've spent a lot of time discussing at MTC, trying to merge two, let's say, transit agencies, even, I'm just going to use this as an example, but if you did WestCat and AC Transit, which are closely aligned as far as service area, you actually don't do a whole lot of savings because of the labor cost that would have to change if WestCat were to be merged with AC Transit. All of WestCat's labor costs go up to AC Transit's levels. And so there's studies done that show how sort of ineffective consolidation may get rid of some administration, but the labor cost ends up changing the whole picture. So I think it's really important that some of this decision process be regional rather than Sacramento, because I'm not sure they understand those things. And there's always a discussion, it should just be one transit agency in Contra Costa County. And I keep saying, I don't know why you guys think this, imaginary line is really makes that more efficient. And so those kinds of discussions are, really ongoing. I think the big plus in the legislature is trying to give enough leeway, because I'm sure the state legislature would prefer that the region handle some of the transit fiscal cliff versus the state handling the fiscal cliff. So I think there's some good reasons why they should try to make this broad and flexible, yet ensure it gets done so that the fiscal cliff issues don't fall on the state level instead of at a regional level. So I think that's going to be the balancing point in Sacramento on making a decision on that bill.
Okay, any other? Commissioner Fedeli?
Yes, I'm in closing, hopefully, I'm hoping some or all of you will join the rest of the mayors of Contra Costa and El Cerrito tonight for the mayor's conference.
Oh, is that tonight?
It's tonight, and if the
I'm only kidding.
if the rain subsides, there'll be a beautiful view for all of you to eat at outside. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Executive staff comments? Seeing none?
I just got one. So we've been hard at work. Next week, we have a very important workshop with GoBiz here at CCTA on February 7th, and to talk about Gomentum 2.0. So we'll be getting a tour out in Gomentum, but coming back here and talking about the actual development of the proving ground. On the developer will also be here as well to be able to discuss with GoBiz some of the finances. And so I'll be bringing a presentation to the board in February to give everyone an update on kind of what's happening with Gomentum Station. But we're excited to host GoBiz here and have a really thoughtful workshop around workforce development and really kind of start looking and developing the California Innovation Alliance that I shared with you in the presentation last year.
All right, thank you. Any other business? Seeing none, we will adjourn at 9:50 a.m. Our next regular meeting will be March 7th, 2024 at 8:30 a.m.